Welcome, a warm welcome to this digital part of the Nordic Street Festival 2022. It's a festival where the Passage Festival, the Elsinore Theatre, together with the Dunkers Culture House and the Culture Center in Helsingborg in Sweden, has created a meeting space for artists, researchers, organizations, people working in the culture sector in the intersection where arts meets sustainability, meets our environmental and climate changes, where arts meets the local circumstances, communities, where arts meets digital opportunities, digitization, and not least technology, VR, augmented reality, and so forth. Over the next 2 days, we will experience a number of shows, conversations, roundtables and workshops in real life settings. Here behind me you see the Culture Yard in Elsinore, and on the other side of the sound tomorrow and Saturday at the Dunkers Culture Center in Helsingborg. In just a very few, in about 25 minutes from now, we will have the official opening and we will try to live stream from that as well. But before we go there, we had the opportunity to meet one of today's major facilitators, you could say. We had the opportunity to get an interview with Maiken Overgaard, who is the program director for Catch. Catch is one of the organizations working here at the Culture Yard. Catch is an organization that works between arts and digitization, arts and technology, arts and sustainability. Maiken have programmed 2 intersections today, 2 meetings, 2 parts of the program, and we had the opportunity to talk with Maiken about that and talk with her about Catch and talk with her about the transition she can see that arts are taking in terms of both sustainable actions and sustainable goals, but also in terms of meeting the opportunities that lies in embracing new technology. So please enjoy the interview we made earlier today with Maiken Overgaard. Hi Maiken. You're the Maiken Overgaard, the program director for Catch. Yes. Here in Elsinore, the northern parts of Zealand, just north of Copenhagen, where we are opening the Nordic Street Festival today, and you're responsible for 2 of the program points. Catch is, if I understand everything right, it's the Center for Art and Technology.
Exactly.
Could you just elaborate a bit about Catch and your own role as a program? What does a program director do at Catch?
I plan all the activities at our center. Yeah, and so Catch is a transdisciplinary center because we work with art and technology, and we work in many different ways, shapes, and forms. But what we're interested in is connecting different types of worlds, bring people together with different backgrounds and sort of people who come from different disciplines, and try to work together in order to transcend these disciplines and get to a joint sort of place of creation and development.
So it's a kind of a laboratory lab?
Yep.
Or,
So we have educational programs, and we have exhibitions, and we have activities such as today, sort of open events for the public as well.
When you say you have educational programs, what kind of educational programs? We're talking about the master student programs, collaborating with universities? Or?
Yes, we work with the universities in Denmark in order to bring their research and educational programs out of the classical frameworks and situate them here in Helsingør, where we always work with an educational partner and a cultural institution and or company in order to bring forward these transdisciplinary actions. And so we both have master students, bachelor students. We have worked with all different levels, PhD schools, etc. We don't limit ourselves, let me say it that way.
And if you don't limit yourself, I take it you're both working with the universities, but also with the art schools.
Yes, we've worked with the sort of Royal Danish Academy of the Arts.
Okay, okay. Well, today you're going to present and kind of frame 2 different program points in the festival.
Yes.
One of these is about sustainability as an artistic practice.
Exactly.
And the other one is about digital presence. I sense there is a kind of both discrepancy and there is something that connects them. The discrepancy is that one of them seems to have a more technological starting point where tech is the driver, and the other one is really driven by transitions in the environment that surrounds all of us.
Yeah.
Could you just elaborate these 2 projects, because I think our digital audience would really like to know more about that program, because they're not here, and unfortunately they're not here. We are, but while you set up the program, what's the key driver for instance that program that you have named Sustainable Artistic Practice?
I believe you're absolutely right. The 2 program sessions are very sort of different in their nature. And I chose that we needed to work with sustainability in the center during the fall in 2021, because I believe that in the state that the world is in currently, you cannot not work with sustainability. Yeah. It has to be part of your practice when you are an artist, when you're an organization within culture. You have to take that into consideration. How can you contribute to creating solutions and somehow bringing the world into a better place?
So what are the opening kind of questions that you would like to receive some reflections on in that program?
So I'm very inspired by one of the persons that I've invited, artistic director Gry Hallberg, and
from Sisters Hope,
from Sisters Hope, and she finished her PhD, artistic PhD in the fall, and she is writing about sustainability and the arts. And one of her points is that we as human beings have sort of detached ourselves from nature. We don't consider ourselves nature anymore. We go into nature. We experience nature, but we don't see ourselves as nature. There has somehow, during time, we have disconnected. And maybe because we have disconnected, it is so much easier for us to destroy nature without realizing that what we are destroying is actually ourselves. And the arts is a very sensuous practice. And using our senses, we can maybe reconnect to nature. So the arts can be a way to reconnect to your senses and a different type of being in the world in order to also realize the universe that surrounds us and how we are a part of that. And I think that's an extremely important notion, just a very basic understanding of what role the arts play in relation to sustainability.
Which is also about emphasizing the human aspect of arts as a bridge, as a connector, not a disconnector. Which is kind of interesting. I really like that point of Gry's, that we have alienated ourselves basically from the very, very ground that we actually derive from, which is an interesting, because it raises a lot of dilemmas about how we kind of interact in our society.
Yeah.
But
I believe that it also brings the arts into play, like where it actually, it's in the forefront.
Yeah.
It's not just some like irrelevant practice.
No,
it is
icing on
actually
the cake.
super crucial that we engage in artistic practice in order to re-engage with the world.
So engaging in artistic practice in order to re-engage with the world is also about reaching out. It's also about making sense, isn't it? It's about connecting to different kind of environments, groups of artists, audiences. So how do you see that movement? Is that, I mean, Gry has made her point, but is it being received? Is it being seen? Is there a receptivity of that position in arts life?
So when I started programming our sort of spring and fall 2022 program, not that many people were engaged in sustainability, but I think there has been more or less an explosion late winter, early spring in regards to sustainability. I think it is now really coming about in both organizations and sort of individual artistic practices.
Why is that?
I think because as well as everyone else, artists and organizers and curators are really sort of interested in this and very scared and worried about what is happening, what we are taking part in currently, and what we need to change.
So that anxiety, which I think most of us share, well, that, what do you see as the outcome right now? Are we looking into a future of quite many dystopic presentations, or is it there another dimension to it which is more about societal change?
Yeah, I think there are many different levels. There are sort of macro societal change, but I think what we will talk about today is also on very sort of individual levels, like how can you work as an artist in order to live more sustainably. One thing that I'm very concerned with is working in the art world, and having done that for a long time. I work with art and technology, and here it's even worse. But there is this infatuation with the new. We always have to reinvent. We always have to reinvent works, exhibitions, ourselves, in order to stay relevant. And not only in relation to funding bodies like foundations, etc., but also in relation just to the art world itself. And I think both Birgitte Kirchhoff Eriksen and Gryvor Hallberg, who are going to be part of the conversation today, are very concerned about this constant chase of the new. But how can we change that from within, basically? How can we be engaged in practices that keep investigating the same subjects, that return to things, that are not always chasing the new?
Thinking about something that Birgitte did a few years ago when she was running a museum in Roskilde, a museum with walls, and she turned it into a museum without walls. And she kind of made a transition where she kind of highlighted as well, saying, well, this is not just for saving money purpose, it's also about making, in that case, contemporary sound art relevant to the people around the museum, the people that are actually living with the museum but might not never come or might not even understand that it was a museum because it was in a very old building with a previous history. And I think in that there was an acceptance about the porosity of cultural institutions today, that they have to redefine relevance in a way. They have to redefine purpose, and they have to think about where are we in a much, much bigger scope than we usually did in a traditional modernistic practice. And hearing you now, one of these frameworks that are actually defining future artworks is sustainability. It's climate change. It's the immediate conflict and crisis we're part of. It's not coming to us, it's actually here. So having that as a frame for that conversation, I'm just thinking, because in my ears it sounds, you're talking about change from within, aren't you? You're really talking about the necessity of changing production practice, how we work, how we decide what we work with, how we produce it, for whom we produce it, and where we exhibit it or we show it. So it's the whole scope, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I'm very excited about the conversation today. I'm not sure which direction it'll go into, but I believe that both Birgitte and Gry and myself currently are sort of interested in somehow changing your own practice, and from there having an impact on others. Because it can also, I think, with climate change, I think the reason why so many become passive is because it's such a huge problem, and how can you actually solve this? it's a systemic problem.
It is a systemic problem.
Yeah.
What would you like? Where would you like to see in the conversations go? What would you hope for?
So I'm interested in getting Birgitte and Gry to express their practice and how they work as an inspiration to others. I think that they are very sort of front runners in the art world in Denmark today in terms of actually creating radical change in terms of how they perform their own practice and how they engage with others.
Yeah.
So it is on a very sort of personal level, but it has a very broad reach in my opinion.
Yeah, it does. It does. And it will be interesting because they have also transformed their relationship with their own companies or with their own work status or the work's circumstance in Birgitte's case. That's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
So that was the sustainable part of today's program, and when we run this interview, you will actually be on stage and you will be conducting this conversation. The other part, which is more the technological part, which you have given the wording digital presence. Could you say a bit more about that program today?
So we started being interested in investigating how you can actually work with presence digitally, because when you talk about performativity and the digital realm, you often hear the argument that it's not really that interesting because you cannot have that presence that the live experience
the two-dimensional realm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I don't agree. I don't agree. I think it's a different type of presence, but it doesn't mean that there isn't presence.
No.
And I think with the people that we've invited, which is artist Niedre and artist and designer Jakob Lacour and curator Niels Righolt, they all work within these domains, and they move like effortlessly between the digital realm and the physical world, and mix things in a very seamless manner. And in my understanding, their practice constitute this new type of digital presence, which I find extremely interesting.
So because that I mean, many art professionals would say, oh, it's so difficult to create hybrid formats that really work. And you're saying, well, we have actually already examples of people who are doing that quite effortlessly. And I mean, Coney Theatre in London have been doing this for at least 5-6 years.
But I'm not interested in like recording live performances.
No.
That's what Dieter and Jakob is working with, is this sort of flow of going in and out of virtual reality, augmented reality, including NFTs and physical objects, like playing around with the different worlds as if there was no border between
Just
them.
to make sure that our digital audience understands exactly what we're talking about. So we're talking about VR and AR, virtual reality and augmented reality, and most people understand what that are.
Yeah, so virtual reality is when you have the headset on, and augmented reality is, I usually use Pokemon Go as example. You use some kind of device to augment your reality, to add another layer to what you're experiencing.
But then there are more aspects to it. So all the short forms you used, could you just...
Yeah, I said VR, AR, and then NFT, which is short for non-fungible tokens, which is a way to sort of certify a digital work online.
Exactly.
And I just find it interesting how the worlds blend currently, and because I grew up in the digital world and I lived a big part of my life online, and of course I also lived a big part of my life in the physical world, but growing up those two worlds mattered equally to me. And I think not everyone had that experience growing up, but what is interesting now is that it actually sort of aligns itself somehow right now in this age, which is amazing.
And do you see that the structures are actually ready to embrace that, or are the structures still very much built on an old-fashioned understanding of what art is all about?
So are you talking about digital structures or artistic structures?
Or maybe even funding structures, artistic and funding structures?
So I think what is happening right now is that when I started...
It's a good counter question. I really like that.
I started 6 years ago here, and I've been working with art and technology my whole professional life. But I think when I started up here, art and technology was more of a subculture still. Yeah. I had always to define what it was when I talked to people, but now people accept it a lot more. And exhibitions in Copenhagen and abroad on like large-scale exhibition sites are often incorporating technology. Yeah. And they do it without even mentioning. It's just a natural act because technology has become so embedded in our lives currently. So I think actually without even saying it out loud, the art world has really adapted technology recent years. The funding structures, I think as long as you don't necessarily mention technology as the sort of core thing in the development, but at least the arts foundations want to sort of focus on artistic explorations. And in Denmark we don't have that many funding structures to support. Okay.
You mentioned before we started the interview that one of the interesting things you have been doing in this digital exploration of yours has been a collaboration with the University of Malmö in Sweden.
Yes. We've had an amazing collaboration with Malmö University the past 3-4 years. And we did a project with master students from January to March where they investigated like what does the future sustainable theatre look like? What is that? What does the future entails for performativity? And they kept on returning to the digital as a very important sort of element in future performativity sort of investigations. Both, as we already touched upon, VR and AR, but also just the obvious that COVID has made us a lot more susceptible to being online and receiving experiences, also artistic experiences online through a screen in various ways. And and we've become used to experiencing theatre in our homes through AR, like things emerging. A lot of people have also bought VR headsets in order to have 3D experiences throughout a pandemic, where they can actually meet up physically with a body, with other people. So I think things are changing, definitely.
I think that's an interesting bridge as well between the sustainable aspect and the sustainable contribution to the festival today and the digital, the more technological part that you're presenting as well. Do you see any dilemmas that occurs that artists have to deal with in the transition?
Many dilemmas.
Such as?
First of all, not everyone has the ability to dive into technology. It's still a domain that's very sort of restricted, both in terms of who has the knowledge and who are provided the knowledge to actually break the barriers.
So there's something about, let's call it competence.
Both in terms of creating and also receiving. And then, because we are experiencing currently like a lot of usage within AR and VR, the problems that we have in our physical world are also emerging in these types of worlds with like different types of abuse and etc. So of course there are a lot of things to be aware of.
So grey zone is not the right word, but in lack of better words, there still seems to be a kind of grey zone where there are things to explore in terms of making it more accessible to work digitally. And
I think we're seeing these types of exhibitions and artistic expressions in many different art institutions for sure. And because we have gaming as such a big sort of industry that really drives a lot of these technologies forward and also help make it more accessible to a lot of different people. So it comes from many different places, this development. But it's still, I mean, I still have to spend a lot of time trying to explain it to my mom, like what I'm doing. And so there are still like a digital divide for sure.
That digital divide, is that also a narrative divide? In the sense that, is there still a perception that the digital narratives are different than the narratives that people will
For
make?
sure, yeah. And that's why we focus on the presence, because the narrative is still very much that the live experience and the digital live experience are two very different things. And they are, but they hold different types of experience, both of them. Yeah. And I think we need to explore digital as well.
Both narratives are equally valid, so there's something about that.
Yeah.
Maiken, thank you very much. What a pleasure to meet you, and
Likewise.
Good luck with the programs this afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. That was the interview that I made earlier today with Maiken Overgaard from Catch, and as you could hear, there has been a lot of reflection put into the work that Catch has been doing over the last 6 years when she has been part of it, in terms of addressing the intersection between arts and technology, arts and digitization, arts and sustainability. Those three issues, sustainability, technology, digitization, as well as the topic of the local, the community, the value of communities, the value of working with communities, will all be part of the interviews and the conversations I will have with our coming guests that will join me here in the studio from about 1:45 and then on to about 1600, where we will end the day. This gives us an opportunity to give you a very short break, so we will have a short intermission, and I hope you will join us again at 1:45, 13:45 Central European Time, here from Studio M4 at the Culture Yard in Elsinore. See you in 10 minutes. Welcome back, all of you. I hope you enjoyed your short intermission. Now in the studio at M4 at the Culture Yard, I'm no longer alone. With me I have a French artist and artistic director of LUI, the Urban Laboratory of Temporaries and Interventions, a theatre group from Marseille.
From Paris, actually.
From Paris, actually.
Yeah.
So Zelda Soussan has joined me, and Zelda is also part of the In Real Life program, of course, but you are our first interview victim for the afternoon. And one of the things that I'm really interested in is that you have a very strong anchorage in ecology and in working with a kind of ecological take on your productions. And you also have, you told me, you have this very profound interest in seeing how you can bring ecological research and sustainable research and future research into the composition not only of your performances and your shows, but even the way you work. So Zelda, just tell us, me and the audience, a bit about what's LUI all about and how did that come about?
So the LUIT is actually a company that works on participation. Yeah. So how to create the condition where the participant can take part in the action. So first we worked upon democracy, and it's also a parallel between democracy and theater. How you can, so I studied in my studies the similarities between how do you make a citizen collaborate to a state or participate in a state or to vote or something else, and how do you do it in a street theater performance. So I'm interested in this, and this shift also to what we are going through today, the climate change, and how people can really participate inside this and not being a kind of nor victim or just outsiders of the situation. How can they really react and manipulate and be responsible or of these matters. So this all research is about this. I was first introduced to those questions. I was working more in social issues such as economic issues or territorial appropriation issues, and now I'm more into this ecological matter, also because I was part of a big experience for me in Belgium 5 years ago with the Yes Man and with the Frank Bochard, who actually make a workshop about Anthropocene and how can Anthropocene could have some how can theater could help people to understand this notion of Anthropocene. And he united like 30 artists, and he told us like that, okay, now it's your turn. The scientists are no longer heard about the population. Every change that happened in the world was also combined helped by artists to create new fiction, and also how can you now help this fiction to develop a sense, sensation, an emotion, a poetic about these changes that we will have to do as a society. So we all took this, some of us already had it, but I took it really strongly because I was like, okay, so now you are in a society where artists can be also helpful, even if I know that this notion has some issue, but there is this feeling that I had that, okay, now maybe I could do something in this matter, and I start to work with scientists that are also really, they don't really know how to do with the, I don't know if you read the last IPCC report, it's impossible to read, and we are all, it's impossible to read, and we are all completely involved in this situation where communication is politics, communication is publicity, communication is everything, but communication cannot really help ecology. I don't know why or how, but there is no connection between.
And that's Hans Bouchard's point, isn't it? That science can't no longer communicate, basically. And so we've reached a point where we need to do something else. Yeah.
And then there is there is this gap that the scientists point. It's not me. They are pointing themselves, saying, "How do we do it?" And we, at the same time, we are trying to read them, and we are like, how can I do it if I try to understand and I cannot? So I need scientists to help me understand it. So now we are working with a forecaster, a meteorologist from Météo France, who send us data about everywhere we play. He sends us the local forecast simulation for 100 years. And also we work with an agricultural engineer who also help us to understand what kind of situation we will have to deal with. But the fact is that they want to invent, they want to understand how to do something else. And they are also stuck in their own issues, that their schools, the way they are taught, their jobs are also stuck in a system. And now in France there is this big movement of engineer, the young ones, the one that enter in the school, that are seeing that the school is no longer accurate, that a lot of things that they understand, that they do, that they learn is actually completely not accurate to the situation. So they are trying to retake the power, but all the schools are really connected to the private sector, so it's really a long process, and the engineer I work with are really strong in this movement of how do you reinvent science. So they are happy to help us, and we are happy to help them. So there is a cross path that is really nice for us.
And this because something happens, doesn't it? When you as an artist go in and interpret a 100-year forecast, local forecast, for instance, something happens with the forecast as a narrative, because you're filtering it. So how does that take on science influence your productions?
So actually what we are trying to do is not to do it, as you say, but to create a structure, a dispositif where the audience can do it. Okay. So we are actually trying to give them a lot of proposition, and in the way they react, we will give them what goes goes in the opposite sense of the narrative. So I need to tell you a bit more about the performance I'm doing,
please do, yeah.
and I will do this workshop about in the Nordic Street Festival. It's called Adaptation Manual to Planet Earth, and actually we are acting as adapters of the planet. So we are reorganizing the human life on Earth, basically, and we are helping the people to do it with the forecast of their place. For instance, if I take Elsinore, I would say I checked the data today, and it was about temperature were rising, sea level rising, a lot of rain. So you have this kind of windstorm. You have this kind of event that goes like that, and as we say in the play, those events are really interesting new fact that makes us look at our society, our landscape, our life, and think how to adapt. And adaptation is really simple. It's for instance, what do you do when you have a blackout at home? What do you do if you have a blackout?
I hope somebody will help me.
But if there is nobody?
Well, if there is nobody and I have a blackout, what will happen when I recover is obviously that I will try to lower my temperature.
So it's not the blackout of you, it's the blackout of the electricity.
If it's not the blackout of me, but the blackout of electricity, I think I do something that is not very climate safe, because I start looking for candles.
Exactly. So you adapt, you find something, you can also unplug something, and to start again. And adaptation is really about how do you invent new ways or abandon other things to adapt. And
I think that's because that adaptation of human beings into the future is very much about repositioning our relationship to nature, isn't it?
It's totally this. It's totally this. We work with three main questions. What do we keep? What do we abandon? And what do we invent? And those three questions are the ones of Jem Bendel in Deep Adaptation. So it's from some years already that they are around. And they were inspired also by, he was inspired by the way he was looking at Native American chief when they had to enter the reserve in the US, and they had to rethink all their life. And they were saying that in between freedom and death, there is a third path, which is a creative adaptation. That is a kind of hope that we can learn from them on how to rethink all in front of climate change. But if I come back to the play, it's when people start to adapt. So we create some exercise with them of collective adaptation design. They take building from the street and they imagine how it will change and what will be their part. So they invent their part in the future in 50 years. And then they enter into a geodesic dome. And inside this dome, they are alone, and there are 15 people. Each generation of people is 15 people, and when they enter, they are welcomed by the former generation voice who give themselves a message, something they have to deal with. And we are outside, and we give them some radio message of events that are happening. And inside the dome, 1 minute is 1 year. So they will spend 50 years as a group, and they will decide how to adapt. And the discussions are really different. And in their way to adapt, the decision that they will take and all, it will give a way to the story, and we are just giving them some tools during the play, tools that are, for instance, there is the Gulf Stream stops, so now the winters are minus 40 degrees, what do you do? So they are like, we are giving them some steps that can happen. And they are trying to reorganize. So
they're adapting and they're reorganizing themselves from these obstructions that you give them, like the Gulf Stream has turned to another direction, temperature will drop dramatically. I think that it raises at least two questions in my head. One being, how do you ensure participation in that process? I mean, I can see very clearly the framework, obviously, but how do you make sure that the audience is really ready to participate?
We are not ready. and we are not ready for climate change. We are
So
in the insecurity of.
So that's it.
That's it. And if they are entering this game,
Yeah.
because it's clearly a game, maybe they will pass in the street and they will say, "What is it about?" They
So
will enter. It's in the street. Or they will book a ticket for a theater show, and then they will be projected in this situation that is already happening. Yeah. And the scientists we are working with are really saying this, that we need to work with insecurity. Yeah. How do you do when you don't have, and some people inside the dome, they are like, but we don't have enough data, we don't have the clue, we don't know. And yeah, but okay, but it's life, and we have to imagine. This is why we are in this play, we are trying to train imagination.
So you both articulate the ability to imagine, but you also articulate the simple fact that we might have enough data really, but we're not using it, and we don't know how to translate it into political action, but maybe not even into individual action. Totally. I think that's quite interesting.
And it's when you say the Gulf Stream is something that is striking us, but we also work with trajectories. Like for instance, now we know that something will happen, that the degree will raise. We work with, we already know. So we have now 20 years, 10 years to do something. We also work with this thing. And if the people are not doing anything inside the play, the next generation will have to deal with the consequences, because they will be out and they will be maybe dead, or they will be out. And what is interesting in this experience, what we want to do, is that when people go outside the dome, they have a reflection made by a scientist about the choice they took, the path they took as a group, and they also can hear in another part of the public space what the next one are doing. So in the end, it creates some kind of fiction that is also written on the dome by some drawers that are there to represent the big story of this, what we call a page of the manual of adaptation of Elsinore.
I really love the title, The Manual of Adaptation into the Future. It's amazing. Just one last question, Zelda. I think there's something about how you frame this in a longer perspective. Do you have, how do people respond when you place that play in a public sphere, for instance on a square? Or
this I don't know, because it's in creation. So it will be ready in 1 year, but we already try. Now in 2 weeks we will do the first try in public space. We did a lot outside and inside the theater. It worked well. Now we will do it outside in Brussels, beginning of July, and we will see. So I don't know. What I know is that the scientists are already thinking about how to write science article on behavior of the people inside the dome, because for sure there will be materials if you do it in different country, in different part of the city even, and so I hope it will give some feedback.
Thank you very, very much, Zelda. Thank you for coming and joining us in the studio, and good luck with your program today and tomorrow and in the festival, and enjoy your stay in this part of Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And to you, our viewers, we will just take a short intermission, so stay with us, don't go too far. We will have about a minute, maybe 1.5 minutes break. We just have to redo the stage here, because in our next interview, we will have 2 interviewees. So stay with us just for another few minutes, and then we will be back. Welcome back. Sorry, it's warm in here, so I shouldn't be coughing at all. But still, welcome back to Studio 4 at the Culture Yard in Elsinore. Now, in this interview, I have 2 interviewees with me, Ula and Karolina, both from Poland, and both engaged in the project Nature Are Us. And I think that would be our opening question, because that's kind of interesting, because you're working in that field of interdisciplinarity between arts and cultural development, arts development, and science. So Nature Is Us is that's an interesting title. So just please introduce yourself and polka dot and your project, but also let's talk a bit more about nature and the connection between art and science. Ula?
So thank you for having us here. It's great to have this opportunity to to discuss about our project, but also to be in the broader context of very similar ideas and thoughts. I'm Ula Zerek from Polkadot. We cooperate with Karolina Wycisk since 2018 as creative producers. And in 2020, I think, we, together with our partners from Czech, Slovakia and Hungary, we came up with this idea, or rather first need to create...
Or even a question?
Or a question mark, yes. Idea with a question mark. How can we work together on a project that would be sustainable and that would bring some valuable change to the work, to the field where we work, since that was our big need to continue doing what we do. And we do different things. All our organizations involved in Nature of Us work with performing arts, but a little bit with a different in a different spheres. So I think sometimes I like to say that we are an institutional project institution or institutional project, because we somehow have different departments. Even it's not one format. Nature of Us. It's also great to hear how the title of the project has its own life, because it's changing. I mean, official name is Nature of Us, but sometimes it becomes Nature by Us. Nature is us. So I think it's all great. It's all great because we also like to play with the meaning, to redefine the meaning every time.
But why did you come up with the Nature of Us to begin with?
I should say maybe about Symposium 9 Lives of Eastern Artists, another event that took place in Olomouc in Czech Republic. That was an event organized by Bazaar, Live Performance Bazaar, our partner from Czech Republic. And I think the conclusion of this event was that artists, researchers, theoreticians in contemporary world need to confront their ideas and work with the world of science, to continue to come up with new formats, new solutions, if we dare to think about solutions. So that was the conclusion of that event, of the symposium, and somehow starting point for our project.
Yeah, and it was also challenging for us, this dream of collaboration between art and science, because we found out during the whole production process, which was also very, I would say, experimental way of working together, that in order to work together we really need more time and somehow understand each other better, not only send one email to the scientist and ask if you want to just come to the conference with your topic that you are working on. And we found out this is really challenging to go outside our bubble and work on a common language and understand each other better. So I guess it was also our conclusion of the project, the starting point, that we want to develop the common sphere for the artists and the scientists, but also the conclusion that maybe we didn't really realize that as we thought we will, but still there is so much work to be done, and the language is still there to be created.
Yeah.
So the language is still there to be created as an interface or an intersection between the scientific language and the artistic language, and maybe even the mother tongues that we have in order of understanding what it's actually about. I think one of the things that a former interview said today was that in a way science has become further from the individuals, and they are in a deep need of finding other ways of communicating what's actually happening in terms of, for instance, climate change. So when you embrace science, do you also see yourself as another kind of microphone or another kind of media, transforming, transporting, communicating scientific research?
Very, very similar ideas appeared during our opening lab in Prague when the project started in August last year. And of course, it is one option that art becomes, as you say, a microphone for the knowledge that is developed and produced by scientists. But we were also very much interested in how the two worlds can meet and actually
intertwine.
Exactly, yeah.
And also how art itself can produce knowledge, because I guess this is also important from the scientific point of view, to also acknowledge that artists also somehow contribute to the knowledge. We were also very careful in speaking about types of knowledge and the access to the different types of knowledge that we have. So we were really
as, for instance, sensitive types of knowledge, or
like the, let's say, Western type of knowledge, and so that was also important perspective to think of how we can talk about from our inner perspective, very local ones, from Central European countries.
Yeah, because I think it's important to say at that point that coming from Poland or Hungary, Slovakia and Czech, so Central Eastern countries, of course, many communities nowadays benefit a lot and are even based in contexts with very much supported by the Western educational system. And of course, it does influence our way of, defining ourselves. But we came to the point where we thought, wait a second, we also have our own local resources. Maybe it is also valuable, and it will bring some extra value, knowledge, experience if we dig into that. Yeah. So that was specifically in this context of our partnership in this setting. But of course, it is some context. Now we are, after this year, we want to continue in this partnership, but also we want to develop even more locally. So coming from Gdańsk by the sea in Poland, we are very much interested in directions and contexts connected to the sea and communities and culture.
So you're breaking it down into a community level, basically.
Yes.
And is that then taking place both in Gdańsk but also in Gdynia and the, what's the name of the third city? Sopot. Yeah, exactly.
We actually went which direction? I'm always confused with directions, but the opposite direction to Gdańsk and Sopot. We went to Sobiszewo, which is an island. Nowadays it's a district of a city, but it's 30 minutes distance from the city center, where we gathered just 2 weeks ago with all the participants of the project. So we should mention here our artists that were invited to the project to do 4 artistic research sessions during that year. These are Jana Terekowa, Zden Switekowa, Bartosz Ostrowski and Żuża Rożawolji. They were all working in 4 countries for 2 weeks. And except for the artists, we also invited so-called delegates, so researchers, critics, artists, activists, cultural workers connected to performing arts, but also connected to environmental studies. We had a great gathering of 36 people, spent beautiful, amazing 2 days in Sobyszewo Island, sharing our experience, sharing the experience of artists of the research sessions, asking many questions for the future, and trying to create possible scenarios for the future. So we are very happy that we somehow wrapped up the edition of the project, but it is also a beautiful opening for us that we are very much looking forward to. And now it's hard work to...
Because that's been your travel, hasn't it? It has been kind of, you started in the outer circle with the artistic question, how do we, as artists, change our own practice from within in terms of adapting into a new reality, giving another perspective to science, opening it up. And now you've gathered that collectively group of people locally in your region, but how does the audience respond to that? How does the ordinary persons that experience your productions, see your shows, are part of that distribution of knowledge through that filter that is your artistic practice? How do they respond?
I think this is the next step for us now, because for this year, for this moment, we were mostly focusing on developing this dialogue between art and science communities. And since, as Karolina mentioned, it was more challenging than we probably thought at the beginning, and also very fascinating, you know, to discover about different world and professions. We had a great partner, local partner, Oceanology Institute of Polish Academy of Science. Sorry, it's a long name. With a great team that opened a completely new world of scientific explorations of the world that seems to be so close to us that we simply don't see.
So just taking that very first fragile steps, because you're still in that very first phase, are there already at this stage, and maybe there's not because it's still the first stage, and you're apparently obviously opening up for more stages to come, but are any conclusions that where you can already see getting this close to science is actually changing your own practice?
Yeah, I'm always afraid of conclusions.
Aren't we all?
Yes. But I think we are. I'm
Let's
very
call them
happy.
traces then.
Yeah, traces. Traces is good. I think we see a lot in front of the potential work together. We see how our experiences, and I mean about artistic methodology and artistic practices, both those connected to dance and movement practices, but also theoretical practices, if I can say so.
Yeah. And if I can just add how maybe the question which came up at the end was also the question of how art actually can change the science, not the other way around. And
exactly, it's a double, it's a two-sided dialogue.
Yeah, exactly. So that was also like still to be discovered. Yeah,
I think we both, I mean, on those sides of the dialogue, the art and science, I think what we share and we are very much interested in is broadening our horizons and also reaching new audiences. Yeah, so we all want to break the bubbles, which are nice and cozy, but to really feel the change, I think we need to go farther, and this is our hope and plan.
On that note, having a good hope and plan.
Yeah.
Ulla, Karolina, thank you very, very much for joining us here in the studio, and enjoy your stay at the festival and the coming days and your presentations. I'm really looking forward to following your project. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And to all of you out there, we will do exactly as what we did just last time. A few minutes break where we just shift the positions and invite 2 new interviewees onto the stage. So stay with us, just a 2-minute break, and we will see you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Now in the studio I have 2 new interviewees with me. Ieva Niedre from Latvia.
Hi.
And Inge Agnete Tarpgaard from Denmark.
Yes.
And you will get an opportunity to introduce yourself a bit further. I know you've been here for quite a while already.
I have.
You've been working hard in Elsinore, experiencing all kinds of weather over the last
yes, indeed.
10 days. Yeah? And Inge, I just love that description of yourself, that I am living so far from the echo chamber I possibly can. Getting out of it.
Just drove here and just landed.
So, please, Ieva, just give a short introduction to the work that you're doing.
I am a culture producer for more than 10 years already, and since 2018 I started to focus more on applied arts and applied theatre, because it was the time when Latvia turned 100 years old, and just before this big celebration our Ministry of Culture thought of the ways how we can celebrate this big number. And they thought that telling people stories and telling stories about history, about spaces, places, people, that would be the best way to do it. And I totally agree with that idea. And then they found me because I have been interested in theatre a lot, in site-specific theatre, and I have been working as a producer already then for quite some time. And we invited some experts over to Latvia, and they introduced us with the methods and methodologies, and that's how I started to work in applied theatre and applied arts. And lately, I have been doing it since 2018. We also made such an interesting platform which is called Baltic Applied Theatre School. That is, I'm running also that platform from Latvia's side, together with my partners, and and now I'm here, and I hope that we can do a lot of interesting things with applied theatre also elsewhere outside of Baltic states.
I think we will come back to the whole concept of how you interpret applied theatre, because there's another aspect to that, I think, in your perspective that is really interesting, but also about how you address the local, because I think that's the theme for our interview, is that focus have been on science, focus have been on sustainability, and obviously science and sustainability will also play a role in our conversation, but the local will be at the core. Please, Inge, please tell us a bit how.
I've worked for 15 years as a teacher, dramaturg, artist, and for the last 5 years I call myself social artist. I think it started with an art project that was like social choreography. And that was when I went to west of Jutland to live and work there. And so I work with social art, and I'm also working as an artist in the municipality there, in the culture department.
So social art, there's something about, you use humor in the way you present yourself. So when people are, if you're Googling, you will see that there's always an opportunity to have fun. There's always an opportunity to engage. There's always an opportunity to dance or to create. So the way you interpret your social role as an artist is basically to facilitate interaction, or?
Yeah, and disrupt.
Disrupt, yeah.
And I like this quote of David Graeber, who is like, there's always a way, you can always do things in another way. It's like, and you can most of the time if you want to. So it's so interesting to it's like you are an anthropologist, also in the conversation about local. I think you come and you do a screening, and then you're an anthropologist. But at some point, you have to stop being that, because you're also a local.
Take a step back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then you also have to step in and allow your community to affect you, because you're also just a citizen.
As a local being the anthropologist, do you see any conflict in that?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
because you are you are on the side, and you have to be very conscious about not
Your own roles.
being on the side the whole time.
Yeah. Is that the same when you work? Because one of the projects you've been working with was based on quite close to the Russian border,
Yes.
engaging people with double identities and trying to raise awareness about that.
Exactly,
position.
and also people who can't find their identity because of this multiculturalism and multilingual background of theirs. Yeah, that is true, but I think my practice is quite different from Inge's in that matter that we go around a lot of these local communities and small villages and towns around Latvia and Baltic states. And yeah, as you mentioned, also we work on the border, on Latvian-Russian border. However, yeah, I think that if we talk about sustainability, then it all starts from these small local areas, and it starts from strong communities. And what is, I would say, one of the biggest problems in these small villages and towns, at least in Latvia, is that these people, they don't think that they are interesting enough to be even raising their voices. So they think that nothing would change, nothing would, they can't impact anything, and they are not interesting topic about what to make a performance in that matter. And that is what we are trying to change, because when we engage them with our applied art practices, first of all, they see that they have a voice, and second of all, they see that this voice can be heard. Of course, theater can't change all the local issues and problems, but it can emphasize them, and it can make them believe that somebody is listening to them, and then maybe that will lead to some other actions, and from art they will move actually to do something, to, I don't know, organize some structures, organize some NGOs, and do these.
Do you measure that kind of shift that they undergo from nobody's interested in us, and then through your interaction?
Our funders would love that we have a measurement system for that, but unfortunately,
But even
of course, we can't
yeah.
have like a precise data on that. I think it's nearly impossible. But what we have, of course, we have people in these communities who say we want more of these things. Yeah. I think that is already one way how we can measure that. And of course, it's also, I can see it from local municipalities, that at the beginning they were very skeptical, and they looked at us like we are some invaders from outside. And what do you want? Do you want that our local citizens make revolution here? And then now they understood that actually they can benefit a lot from that. So now local communities are starting to invite us over because they realize that it's a good way. It's like a catalyst. We can talk about these issues and things and what people are interested in their small villages and towns, and they can use it in their own behalf if they're clever enough.
When I looked into your project, I think it was quite interesting that there is this level of multi-voicedness, that you give voice to a lot of people that might not be heard.
Yeah, that is the one
core
thing we really
of it,
want.
and I think maybe that is actually the measurement itself, that all these voices are actually being heard and articulated. Because I think that's the strong point, and that is something you share with community art here, and you can join me if maybe I'm interpreting it wrongly, but when I look into the arts landscape in Denmark, what I can see is that there's a still stronger emphasis on communities, the value of communities, the value of the groups that are not heard, the values of the unusual suspects when we talk arts and culture, the value of other perspectives, other kind of narratives. So Inge, when you start your social anthropological interaction and obstruction back home in Western Jutland, in Ringkøbing, how can you see transitions happening as a result of that?
I think, as what you said, it comes from the community saying we want you to come back. What I find challenging is that when we are done as artists, then who is going to take over? And it's like, I think, a common thing spoken about. You have to have maybe a social worker to take over, or a union or something. So what we're trying in a project called The Artist Close By is to stay until it is self-reliant, until we are not needed anymore. So that's really interesting. Can you, for instance, teach a community to curate art themselves?
Can you?
I don't know yet. We are going into a new phase with this project. What I find interesting is the role of the artist, really, how to not only be this voyeur, and I'm also interested in your perspective on this, like how can you, when are you a good artist to go into a community? Like, and what I am just scratching the surface of now is you have to be able to show vulnerability and know why do you go into it, what kind of wound are you scratching off your own kind of history to want to help and support, and that you know, sometimes they didn't ask you to come, but you still like quite intrusive about it.
Yeah, I totally agree with this thing that for in at least what I think is that these artists who go to work within the communities, they have to really be also trained for it professionally, and as you say, they need to have this need to talk about these matters and to talk with these people, because I think what is the worst case, what can happen is that artist really only wants to fulfill their own dream and, you know, just focuses on artistic value on it. I believe that artistic value is as important as the process. It is very important also for these local people who we work with, that it's something good that they create, but the process is as important. And if the artist focuses only on result and works as they would work, I don't know, in really on the big professional stages where everything is only like they want to have it and etc., then it's doomed from the beginning, because first of all they can do more worse than good, and second of all maybe this community just will say, okay, thank you, we don't need these crazy people coming here and trying to do something with us, because that's also how I started my project in 2018. I didn't have a clear methodology, but I had a feeling that I need to look for artists who really want to talk about these matters and who already have done some, at least some interactive work or some site-specific work. And then I invited them to join a program when we invited experts from all around Europe. They learned, and only after they made some learning process, then after they were able to go in the communities. And still, now we have a bunch of artists. I would say approximately I have like 10 different kinds of professional theater artists who work with me, and depending on the project we pick who wants to do that and who will go and who will work.
So it's both from theatre and dance and movement.
Yes, dramaturgy. Also, we work with anthropology students and anthropologists and a bunch of professional people. But yeah, the first thing is that they have to go through the learning process and become facilitator, and only then they are allowed to go and work with people. And I think it's important.
I think it's interesting, this balancing between the artistic vision and dream on the one side, and then empathy, having empathy enough to be porous, fragile enough, open enough to allow that group of people you engage with to really influence the end project, and vice versa. I think because that's a difficult position, isn't it? It's not just a matter of education. It is a matter of education.
It's also very personal.
Also very personal. Yeah, it is. Just because I'm very curious about your upcoming projects and the projects that you're talking about here, what will be the core of your presentation here, Inge?
It's called being an invasive species. And I wanted to talk about
Do you want to be
how
that?
not to be that, but actually sometimes you have to be. And we had a beautiful project in a village where we started with we borrowed an empty shop because the shops are closing. They do in the countryside, and we asked the locals. So this was the meeting place, and we asked them, couldn't you just have done this yourself? You could have asked Aina to borrow the empty shop, and they were like, no, we couldn't. And it's just so simple. You have to be this energy from outside and intrude and just come with a different perspective and a curiosity of the place.
But that's also quite demanding, isn't it? The curiosity of the place, coming with that outside perspective, but also be an invasive species, coming in with obstructions and having a sensibility, at least, to understand that might be very uncomfortable for some.
Yeah, I think what was good for us was that we were like 8 artists from very different disciplines. So we came at the same time, and we helped each other because we had very different methods on how to work with community. They were all community artists, but one would participate in the sports that they were doing and the meetings, the local meetings. And 2 others would be at the school, and another one would do song evenings. So in this, and we had one girl who went into people's homes to take photos of their curtains from inside. So she was like, at the end, she was like, oh, you have to speak to her. So we helped each other like that. So it's like, if you just come one or two, it's much more difficult.
And it depends on the community as well, right? I think because there are some places where you can be more like, entering with a whole bunch of artists and already taking over a little bit as a hurricane, but in some places you really need to have this very deep personal contact first, and then you can see where to go. At least that's how we sometimes do, that we arrive only 2 people, maybe me and anthropologist, and then we start talking, we create some workshops where we see the issues, and then we think, okay, maybe this artist, this director can come, and this dramaturg can come. They could be very good for this. So yeah, I think it depends from situation.
So there is a kind of matchmaking taking place, or a pairing at least. To what extent do local narratives, local stories, local perceptions of themselves influence the design of your end work?
It matters a lot. Like, it's really, you have to be open for maybe 90% of the time to just take stuff in, and then by the end you're like, oh, I have to make a presentation or a project. But you have, that's your material. And
do you even negotiate the design of that project together with the subjects you're working with?
No, I think at that point it's up to the artist. Yeah. But to answer what you said, we will come out twice, and also with some of the artists to do research and then come back, because there's so much knowledge to gain in coming several times.
So over how long a period are you working? What's the time frame you're talking about?
This would be 3 to 9 months.
3 to 9 months.
Yeah.
It's very different.
Yeah. It's a pretty long time. It's a very slow process in a way, but also it sounds to me, a very healthy process. Yeah. It really respects them. Ieva, you're working here right now.
Right now, yes, and that is a very interesting case because, as Inge said, usually 3 to 9 months. Totally agree with that, depending on community and the amount of work, but this time we had 1 week.
So it's a speed process.
It's a speed process, definitely, and it's the work. We work with community of youngsters from different countries within the community of Helsingor. So it's like a bit of inception feeling for me. You know, this double community work, and it's very interesting. But of course, we tried to get as deep as we could. But it will be a little bit like a teaser, how we call it, because it will be installation and a little small performance where we will give voices of these people who we met and we talked with them. But yeah, it's more like a teaser, and it can turn to be something bigger if maybe someday. Yeah.
So it's a teaser for the participants, but it's also a teaser for the institutions here in Elsinore to facilitate that kind of opportunities, or?
Well, we'll see. It's very hard to tell how it will turn out because I know how the result will look like now, but I think it's teaser for everyone. It's teaser for the community themselves, how we as a persons who come from outside work 1 week with them, what we can get out of it. It's teaser for, of course, for institutions here. Maybe we can create something bigger together one day. But also for me, because it's a new type of, like we had this week and we were doing it in totally place where I didn't know anything about. And especially because I knew that youngsters also will come without any knowledge. I also, till the last day, I didn't Google, I didn't look. So I would have as fresh opinion as they did, and we would go in and it's okay, let's see what we can do with it.
Just coming back to some of the things that we mentioned in the beginning of the interview, that you're working, you're coming in, you describe yourself as an invasive species coming into your local context. You're here on a speech project, which is completely different from a 3 to 9 month process.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that politicians and civil servants in the culture sector are talking about is how to understand community work, how to understand this intersection between arts and communities, the focus on the local, and to value it, because the structures, at least in Denmark and in Sweden for that case, are still quite old-fashioned, modernistic perception of what art is all about. Can you see in Latvia and in Denmark that projects like yours are actually opening up the scope and the understanding of the importance of working with communities? In terms of funding bodies, political bodies, cultural policy?
Yeah, I think because I'm also in the machine room in the cultural department of the commune where I live and work, I can see how they can see the value of working together with artists, like for instance the land district coordinators or the architects. So that's really beautiful to see, because they always talk about working across the
pipelines,
yeah,
breaking the barriers.
Yeah, and when we come with a project, it is sometimes much more helpful if we kind of attach ourselves to like architects already going out working with the village. That can be helpful because they're already invading. So we can kind of hatch on to that. So that's what we're also talking about now. Or a specific village who wants something to happen because it's not working. Then we can come in. But that kind of demands, I think, now we're 2 artists in the cultural department, that we are in there and part of the conversation and influencing it from the inside.
And how does that work? You're kind of employed as an artist to engage outside of the cultural department. But are you also employed as an artist to disrupt the formation of cultural politics?
I think we're not, but it happens.
It happens.
Just by our presence there.
It's a side effect.
Yeah, and that's super interesting. But it's kind of not what we really hired for. But we were hired initially by Statens Kunstfond, artist in residence, to work with children and youth culture, to lift it with the institutions that are already there. And now that stops now this summer, and then the municipality is trying to prolong us. So we'll see. So we have 9 more months, and then we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
In Latvia, is that? What's the situation there?
Yeah, I think definitely it's changing. The process is slow because, as I mentioned also before 2018, we didn't have so many practices of applied art. We had few artists who were very interested and who did it, professional artists, but they were some cases and not in the majority in the theater field. And also, like we have this really, like I think that is a measurement for Latvia's theater field, is this really huge theater award, which every year everyone gets. And that was really, I think it was a point when I see that things started to turn, when this jury of this really huge theater award, they finally came to one of our performances to like evaluate it and judge it. So that was they didn't give any award that year, but it was they
First
showed
step.
that they understand that it's something different, that it's professional art. Because before, for me at least, it was really hard to tell them that it's not amateur art. Because in Latvia we have a really strong amateur arts movement. It's been supported also during Soviet times. It was a really big part of rebellion of Latvians. And it was supported all the time through singing in choirs, dancing in dance groups, and playing in amateur theaters. So in every small village in Latvia we have an amateur theater. But they are really trying to be like professional actors. So they are trying to take very amazing plays like Hamlet, for instance.
All the classics.
Yes. Or sometimes like Latvian dramaturgy. But they were never working with what they had there at their place. And it started to happen only like 10 years ago, slowly. And in 2018 we came with whole program with education and with methodology and with many projects where they could take part. But still it was because we also have a lot of amateur theaters are interested in this, and they have been participating. For me, it's really hard job to tell them that no, it's not like, I don't know, a concert for Midsummer Celebration where you all just participate like this. It's something different, and it has to go deeper. It has to research some issues, and of course also celebrate the good things what they have, but to do both of these things. And then slowly we are trying to find out different ways. We have different projects. Some are more related with professional actors and artists going and interviewing people and involving a community as part of the performance. Sometimes it's only community based, but the director or dramaturg, they are professionals. So we experiment with different levels of involvement from artist side. But yeah, I can see that finally people are also from funder side. They really need to hear word community. That is very top word in Latvia right now. And which I think is good. Of course, it starts to become like everywhere they need to use it, but it's still better. But still, from the main cultural funders, it is a challenge because they don't understand devising as a process. They need an actual like play or at least very structured structure. And when you say that, okay, but we can't predict the result, it's what you mentioned also, that we talked earlier, is it like, do you know the result already, or it's something what happened? So, of course, I would say you don't know exact result. You maybe have some idea how you want to see it, but it so much changes in the process and in talks and in talking with the people. So that is, I think, the hardest part for funders to get past this feeling that they need to have a already written play.
Yeah, because I think that is, from a cultural political side of view, that's the challenge, isn't it? That they are basically structured to have a very kind of hammer-nail definition about what are we supporting. A play is a play is a play is a play. Hamlet. We all know what that is about.
Yeah.
What you're basically doing, which they, in my perspective, maybe should consider at least to understand as a double-sided process, because you're not only interacting with people, being artistic anthropologists, but you're also creating new drama. You're creating new work. I mean, so instead of playing Hamlet, we are playing something contemporary, something that really resonates with people in Ringkøbing or on the border of Russia in Latvia. So there's something about getting that into politics.
Yeah, definitely.
You were about to say something.
No, just saying, it's new stories.
Yeah.
The story, it's like cultural heritage, digging that out, taking a snapshot of how is life here right now.
Yeah.
Kind of it was so interesting to be, so we are in a very rural area, and I spoke to these pensionists. Their aim was they had 2 villages and they wanted them to be more united. And I realized when talking to a lot of them that they were often married to one who was initially from the other place. So it's very beautiful love story. So 60 years ago, they would go to balls like twice a week. around the place, and a bus would pick them up, and it was a really good infrastructure. And nowadays, you can't even have a shop going, because before it was like walking distance, and now it's driving distance. That means you shop in the bigger places and work there. So I had no idea of that, like, why is it like this? And I spoke to a sociologist who could pinpoint that for me. But it's so interesting to then see yourself as part of your time and of history. Oh, this is why these 3 shops are now closed. And listening to them tell about back when, and then doing a small theatre play about that.
I think that's something that's very beautiful. It resonates with the whole idea of reminiscence and picking up stories and using stories from before in the understanding of stories of today, and there's something about that that's very nice. I know we have been taking you out of a very busy first day afternoon, and you're supposed to be somewhere else in just a few seconds or minutes. So, Ieva and Inge, thank you very, very, very much for joining me in the studio.
You're welcome.
You're welcome to get out and get out of this heat that is in here. Yeah, it's sweaty. So thank you very much. Enjoy your days, and I really hope to pop into you today, tomorrow, or Saturday. And to all of you who have been following us, now we will take a short break, and even I will go out to get some water in my face, and see you then when we will introduce the 3 movies from Slow Mo. So take a break, and we will be back soon. Conducting. I hope you have enjoyed today, enjoyed the interviews, that you feel, if not enlightened, at least inspired by the artist talking about their projects, but also about how sustainability, technological development, digitization are influencing the formation of art in the future. Thank you very much for a wonderful Thursday. Hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.